American art music, and this is merely a brief overview. Jazz is an American art music. It stands alone from Western music or European music. It is its own thing. Some key elements are that jazz has a cultured, recorded, written, and studied repertoire. So that alone qualifies it to be in its own classical tradition. You can have classical traditions of musics throughout the world, and there are vibrant classical traditions in India, China, Japan, different parts of Africa, the Americas. Um, the one that we've studied mostly this semester has been European or Western music. So jazz is another repertoire, and it originated from the confluence of styles and cultures in America during the early 20th century, and New Orleans is the hub for all this development. Key elements: improvisation is core to nearly every jazz performance, and that's where you make up solos on the spot. And this is developed by using the chords and scales that are being performed by other members of the group that a soloist would be in, and they play new chord and scale patterns over top of that, creating new melodies. So it's not just instant inspiration, it's a lot of study over time. Syncopation is where you place the stress of the pulse on a less important beat. Um, so instead of being on the down, maybe you have it on the up, one and two and three and four, that sort of thing. And another example would be in 4/4, where normally beats one and three, but especially one are the most important. We're putting the emphasis on one, two, three, four, one, two. That happens all the time in jazz, especially in swing jazz. Swing eighth notes in most settings emulate a vocal style. It's a staggered rhythmic feeling. Most important instruments in jazz, we've got the rhythm section, which acts as a unit, providing stability, time, and harmonic foundation. We've got the piano, bass, drums, and sometimes guitar. And then horns, we've got trumpet, trombone, clarinet, saxophones. The voice, singing popular tunes in a swung or bluesy style, also scat singing. That's where they will improvise without words using horn like um, syllables and phrasing. Um, Jazz origins. So, New Orleans and its convolution of a diverse population of West Africans, French, Spanish, English, Portuguese ancestries, blending of cultures and traditions. And we have two dominant popular styles, um, popular and traditional styles that develop that lead us to jazz: ragtime and blues. They are important keys that get us to Dixieland. So here are two pre-jazz styles that I'll cover briefly. Ragtime becomes popular in the 1890s. It's an African American pianist take popular tunes of the days and rag them or put them in up tempo. They speed them up and put them in a syncopated style. It's heavily repetitive and most commonly laid out in forms AA, BB, A, CC, DD. And our person of interest that I want you to take a listen to some of his recordings is Scott Joplin, 1868 to 1917, the self-proclaimed king of jazz and ragtime. There's a biography page that talks a little bit about Scott Joplin and his music, and then Maple Leaf Rag. There's a recording of him that he made on a piano cylinder for a player piano that is really of interest. So listen to that. The blues begins around 1890s, combining African American spirituals, work songs, and street cries. Originally unaccompanied songs, but soon spreads to the banjo and the guitar. Standard form is that it's a three-line stanza with the first two stanzas being the same and 12 bars. So it's 12 bars of time, and that's an old note of see page 23 to 43 that I need to eliminate from the lecture. But it's a three-line stanza, 12-bar form, and 4/4. Bessie Smith, the Empress of the Blues, was the best-selling artist of her day, and she did this in the face of extreme racism and sexism. There's a bio worth watching, and there's a video of her singing St. Louis Blues from a movie that she was put into. Next, we're going to move on to the stylistic periods of jazz, and they're kind of listed in chronological order, but all of these styles still exist today. And also, let me note that there are still ragtime performers today, and there are still blues performers of today. So, our major trends in jazz: Dixieland, then swing/big bands, then bebop, cool, free, and fusion. So Dixieland. Here's a picture of King Oliver's Creole Dixieland Jazz Band, and King Oliver is seated right there. He's a cornetist, and that's some of our typical instrumentation that you would have: clarinet, trumpet, or cornet, especially cornet in the early days. Then trumpet, trombone, drums, bass, and sometimes tuba, piano, or banjo. And that happens to be Louis Armstrong, young Louis Armstrong standing in the back. Dixieland originates in New Orleans, Louisiana, and quickly immigrates north due to the great migration to cities like Chicago and New York. It's a blending of traditional African American spirituals, African rhythms, European harmonies, and European instruments. Popular features would be melodies of the day with improvisation over top of them. Some Dixieland also utilizes polyphony, similar to our medieval music. Remember, polyphony is where you have multiple ideas going over top of each other that are of the same importance. And there again, I mentioned the voices. Early swing feeling in the music, but not fully developed, and it's mostly men in groups, segregated by race, and that's also Lil Hardin, who was Lou Armstrong's one of his wives, as a pianist, so she was a little bit unusual as well during this era. Okay, so there's Louis Armstrong, nicknamed Satchmo, Satch, Pops. Important early jazz musician, noted as a singer, inventor of scat style. And watch this biography from biography.com. There's Dippermouth Blues. Take a listen to that. And here is him on a film singing and playing Hello Dolly. And at the end of his life, towards the end of his life, he was noted for this performance of It's a Wonderful World. So take a listen to that too. Some other notable Dixieland musicians: we've got King Oliver, Kid Ory, Sidney Bechet. We've got currently going on the New Orleans Preservation Society, and some modern groups such as the Young Blood Brass Band, who use similar instrumentation, and it's a bit of a Dixieland, but there's also a bit of a funk and different rock and hip hop element to groups like and the new modern ones. All right, the swing and big band era. Pictured is the pop music icon of the day, Glenn Miller and his big band. And you can see that you got the band leader out front, who happens to be a trombone player in this instance. Trombones there, trumpets, saxophones. He's got a guitar back there, and the rest of the rhythm section, the bass, the drums, and not pictured, probably out to the sides, our piano player. Swing bands, usually four trumpet, four trumpets, four trombones, five saxophones, piano, bass, drums, and guitar. Sometimes other percussion, popular tunes of the day, elaborate arrangements. So we're making the improvisation a little bit less important, putting the focus on the big group. Lots of emphasis on dancing. Early groups are often segregated by race, so different styles develop along those lines. Still, almost all men in the groups, and other than featured singers. So some of our notable black bands that are fantastic groups: Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Fletcher Henderson. Early white bands would be Benny Goodman, Artie Shaw, Glenn Miller. The swing era is where this music was highly popular and commercially successful. So commercial music as well. 1920s and the 1940s. Um, Highlighting Duke Ellington, considered by many to be the greatest American composer of any genre, pianist, bandleader, and composer. Watch this video biography. Listen to his "Don't Mean a Thing" if it ain't got that swing, and then the tune that became the signature of his band, written by his musical collaborator Billy Strayhorn, "Take the A Train." More big bands: Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Thad Jones, Mel Lewis, Stan Kenton, Bob Minster, Rob McConnell, Buddy Rich, Woody Henderson, Benny Goodman, Tommy Dorsey, Glenn Miller, Artie Shaw, Fletcher Henderson. The list keeps going on. Okay. At one time, there were jazz orchestras with big bands all over the country. The next style that comes as a reaction to the big band, large group, and dance-focused, less improvisatory style is bebop. And pictured, we've got in the middle Bird or Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie right there. Um, and so the music is fast, up-tempo, frenetic, virtuosic, focuses on the improvisation. Um, Most of the time, there's a short melody played, and then you have the soloist come in, and then the melody out. Most of our bebop recordings we have of the time are 3 minutes or less, and that's due to the recording technology of the days, the 78 revolutions per minute record. Swing style is maintained but sped up. This style is centered around New York City during World War II and post World War II, so popular in the 1940s and 50s. Charlie Parker, noted for his virtuosic technique, American saxophonist, advanced harmonies from Kansas City, and more heavily in New York, 1920 to 1955. Very short life, but very important. Listen to Ornithology. Important bebop musicians. We've got Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, Sonny Rollins, Cannonball Adderley on the saxophone, and folks like Dizzy Gillespie, Miles Davis, Clifford Brown, Freddie Hubbard on trumpet, trombone, J.J. Johnson, David Baker, Slide Hampson, Kai Winding, pianist Oscar Peterson, Bill Evans, Bud Powell, Thelonious Monk, bass Ray Charles, Curly Russell, drums Max Roach, Buddy Rich, Kenny Clark, Art Blakey, Louis Bellson, guitarist Wes Montgomery, and Charlie Christian. The next style that reacts to bebop being so fast and frenetic and so much going on is cool. Things are given space. The arrangement comes back in as an important feature, but still, we're going to keep the soloist dominant. And pictured here is Miles Davis, who is important in bebop, but he's really the one that runs with the trend of cool. And there's Gil Evans, the arranger and conductor, and some musicians that work with Gil Evans and Miles Davis in the back. So more of a West Coast trend, slower, less note laden than bebop. Swung solos and slower paced melodies, space for improvisation. And we're looking at bigger groups, not just two horns and a rhythm section, but now we use several instruments, sometimes big band size, sometimes a little smaller than that. You've got more racial integration on recordings and public performance, and 1950s and 60s really pioneered by Miles Davis and Gil Evans. And there's Miles, pictures from a later period. Miles was part of jazz as a as a bebop player, as a cool player, and then later as a fusion rock, and then follows other trends further. It's very commercially successful. There's a short bio, an example of cool playing. Next, free jazz. So just like the atonal composers of the Western tradition serial are looking for a new style, a new trend, free is where you get rid of the melody, get rid of the chords and the or the time rules, and you just try to make up more of it on the spot. Um, it's unconventional. Some of it is hard to listen to. Some of it is easy to listen to. Jazz improvisers gather in a group, and sometimes they'll plan what they're going to do. Sometimes it's just spur of the moment. That's very much avant-garde or cutting edge, developed in the 1960s. Ornette Coleman is very important in this style, 1930 to 2015, and innovator and leader in free jazz. And check out this article with the recordings on there. And he collaborates with some pop musicians as well. Grateful Dead, Yoko Ono, couple. Notable free jazz musicians: John Coltrane, Pharoah Sanders, Ornette Coleman, Wayne Shorter, Eric Dolphy, Ray Anderson, Charles Mingus, Thelonious Monk, Cecil Taylor, Horace Silver, Keith Jarrett, Chick Corea, McCoy Tyner. Some of the same folks that have been important in other trends and future ones. These are people that change and develop. I got my slides out of order. So fusion. It's the blending of jazz and rock. And there's Miles Davis again, his landmark album, Bitches Brew, which is a jazz rock album. Developed in the 60s and 70s, fuses jazz and rock together. Often a blend of jazz acoustic instruments and electrified rock instruments. While melody and arrangements are still important, the improvised solo carries more weight. And fusion, especially the early fusion stuff, has a little bit of free jazz to it. It's influenced by that trend. Chords and scales are the harmonic language of jazz with a little bit of rock. Some groups with soloists, and you can take a look at that on the slides a little later. And some important albums are listed as well. Getting next to our fusion group, we've got Weather Report 1970 to 1986. Personnel varies, but Joe Zawinul on keyboards and Wayne Shorter were at the core of this. We also included Jaco Pastorius, Miroslav Virtue, and Pete Eckstein. The band is typically a saxophone, keyboard, bass guitar, and drummer. And check out that Birdland recording. So some other trends that I didn't talk about but are of note: Latin jazz, hard bop, modern pop crossover, international, modal. There's also crossover classical, funk, soul, R&B, hip hop, you name it. So, as I said, this is just a brief introduction, and there's many styles not being discussed. So take from it what you will, and that's it's a little bit of jazz history in a short video introduction.